Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in. I know that there's a bunch of people that are probably going to be rolling in over the next few minutes. First question that I would love to ask everybody is, where are you from, the company that you represent, and what support tool you use? Hopefully you can all see my screen. Please let me know if you can. We're going to be talking about the 12 million tickets that we've analyzed and benchmarked across the support tool industry. And for those of you that don't know, Time Doctor is one of the largest second by second work databases on the planet. It essentially is. I say one of, but it is. And what we can do is be a third party source of truth for everyone that's trying to get access to answers like, what support software should we really use? Because you can go onto G2 Crowd or you can go onto Capterra and you can kind of do these analyses, but no one has direct analysis inside of a certain ecosystem. And we've analyzed 12 million tickets across our entire network to be able to give you access to that information. So I'd love it. At the beginning of this presentation, just put it in the chat. Where are you from, the company that you are from, and what support tool you currently use, because that's super useful for us to be able to give context. And me and Michael won't be able to answer the vast majority of the questions, unfortunately, because we literally have like our screens all set up. And I am currently on a workation in Thailand, and Michael is obviously not. But it's my presentation. I don't have the separate screen available to be able to answer questions. But we do have Vaishali that's in the chat. And if you have a question, please ask it, and Vaishali can actually answer you directly inside of the chat whenever you need it. But let's get into it now that we're seeing more people kind of pour in. First thing that I want to be able to do is give you a little bit about me and Michael, and then also Time Doctor, which is the reasons why we are here today. So my name is Liam Martin. I'm co-founder and chief innovation officer at Time Doctor, which is a very nice way of saying I basically just try to figure out where the company is going to be over the next 36 months in terms of technology, and then try to align the roadmap towards that particular direction. I don't know, Michael, if you ever really heard the definition of what I've defined as my job, but that's basically how I'm thinking about it in terms of being chief innovation officer.
Super cool.
I'm also Cool. Yeah. I'm also co-organizer of Running Remote, which is the largest conference on remote work, which we have been running since 2018. And we actually have our next event in Lisbon, end of April 22nd and 23rd. So if you're interested in going to that, go to runningremote.com. And if you're interested in learning about remote distributed work, that is the largest conference and also, I think, the best conference on remote work. You can check that out there. Also, I'm the co-writer of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Running Remote. We had to use the same name because that's what our publisher really wanted us to be able to use. And if you're interested in checking that out, you can go to Amazon, pick up a copy. And also, if you go to the Running Remote conference, you obviously get a free copy of the book as well. And my mission in life is to focus on understanding how work works. I've actually been doing it for decades. Michael, I don't know if you knew this, but for graduate school, for me, I was actually in the sociology of work. So that was what my master's degree was in. And I love analyzing how people work and how people do their jobs, which obviously translated into Time Doctor pretty easily. Next person we have on the docket is Michael. So Michael has been, you're essentially the chief data scientist at Time Doctor, and you were previously a business analyst at Bain and Co. or Bain Capital. Is it Bain and Company or Bain Capital?
Bain and Company.
Okay. Essentially, Michael is a brain in a box. So he is the chief brain in the company. And what he does is he's really helping us analyze how we can use the data inside of Time Doctor to be able to build bigger and better insights into what we're doing for you as customers or prospective customers of Time Doctor. Michael, anything that you would want to add to your slide about you?
Yes, I would like to add that first of all, Liam forced me to wear this turtleneck, and secondly, that I'm very much happy to work with Liam and try to frame the wild and sometimes crazy ideas that he comes up with into actionable, specific, and data-driven insights, some of which we are going to share with you today.
Well, and 10% of the time it does work, right? You'd give me that at least.
Well, that's generous. I would say five is good.
Okay. Has anyone been to Thailand before? If so, let me know down in the chat because I got to tell you, it is a fantastic spot. And I also would just love to know where you're currently located now. That's also a really big, important piece of information because we get people from all over the world that jump on to these sessions with us. And it's super powerful to be able to know where you're located because it actually does affect a lot of variables connected to your overall work productivity, which we're thinking about actually doing in another session here. But let's get into it. Overall, and this is, by the way, almost entirely Michael's project that he's been working on over the last couple weeks. So I'm going to be explaining the high level, and then Michael is actually going to go deep on each of these insights that we've gotten. But generally, what we ended up doing is we looked at 15,293 daily active agents on our system. So we had over 15,000 people that are support reps throughout the Time Doctor network. And what we did with that is we then correlated that to 12.9 million 78 tickets. Is that right? I should have put the commas in there. Yes, it is right. So 12.9 million and plus change tickets that we analyzed, and we looked at these top support ticket software applications: Zendesk, Freshdesk, Intercom, HubSpot, Gladly, and Help Scout. I would love it. Anybody here, what actual support tool do you use? So if you use Zendesk, just put Zendesk in the chat. If you use Freshdesk, put that in the chat. If you use something completely different that's not on this list, please let us know because we might be able to do analyses on that particular tool in the future. I know, Michael, there were probably a couple other tools that didn't necessarily make the list because they just didn't have the amount of user base for us to be able to make a meaningful analysis, correct?
Correct. We are planning of adding Salesforce there and maybe a couple of others which you may put down in the comments. But these are the large ones and at least a good start.
Yeah, and I would love it if you use Salesforce and you really want to be able to see how Salesforce connects to all these other tools. Let us know in the chat because then we can do it for you guys. So how do we actually get this data? Where did it come from? Well, and this is a big debate between me and Michael right before we actually jumped onto this webinar, but I actually think that the entire space that we're looking at and we're looking at analyzing over the next 6, 18, 36 months has historically been something that we've called workforce analytics. And I think we're moving into the age of predictive workforce analytics. And what we can do with all of this data is we can actually produce a predictive output for this information. So analyzing all this data allows us to, number one, figure out which support ticket software tool is the best one for you. You might actually, at the end of this webinar, think, I'm going to switch from Zendesk to Gladly as an example. And there actually is a lot of interesting insights kind of connected to this, which we can get into. But the concept is that once we have all of this data, then we can start to actually create some predictive components from this. So I'll give you an example of just a small implementation of what we are doing inside of Time Doctor. So one of the beta features that we're currently adding is something called our support agent benchmarking report. So we can take this information and we can benchmark where you are in comparison to everyone else in the industry. So we can look at your individual organization, and we could see the tickets per agent per day. We could see the tickets solved by, what agent, the amount of the session duration. We're going to get into all of this obviously inside of the presentation, but we can basically map and benchmark you across the entire industry. And there's a bunch of other stuff that we're doing that can help you predict actions inside of your organization, which you can only get if you go to get.timedoctor.com/beta-program. And Vaishali is going to put this in the chat. If you're interested in getting access to this report, if you're interested in getting access to our beta features, you can get access to all of those things just by going to this URL. We'll give you more details at the end of this presentation, specifically how you can get access to all of this data. But if you're interested in doing it now, Vaishali is going to put it in the chat for you. All right, let's get into it. And I think I actually have the URL. Oh, and here's another big part. This entire presentation is confidential. It's important to be able to reinforce this. Anything that we do connected to the beta program is something that we deem as confidential. So whether you are a current customer or a prospective customer, that's why I'm being a little bit more protective of telling you what is inside of the beta program, even though it's awesome stuff back there, because we can't really show this off publicly, and we can only show it off privately to people that are interested in becoming part of that program. But whether you are a current customer or prospective customer, this is something that you can opt into relatively quickly and easily after we actually take a look at your company and who you are and make sure that you're not somebody evil. All right, so, and then also the URL here is get.timedoctor.com/beta-program, but Vaishali has that in the chat. Let's get into it. Michael, is there anything else that you want to be able to add before we get into our first benchmarking insight?
Let's go straight to the insights. That's the fun part.
Perfect. So, as we said before, Michael analyzed all of these major applications a bunch against multiple different variables. And I think we have over 10 variables that he analyzed here. First one is tickets opened per user per day. So, and I'll kind of give my version of the explanation, and hopefully I get it right, Michael. And if I don't, please correct me. Essentially what's happening here is we're looking at the amount of tickets that are opened per active user, meaning someone that you hire inside of your organization, per user per day. So in this case, Zendesk opens 29 tickets per day. Gladly coming in, and I didn't even know what Gladly was before we actually did this analysis. It's really interesting because they're a brand new company. They also tied Zendesk with 29 tickets opened per user per day. And then we have companies like HubSpot, Freshdesk, Intercom, and HelpScout that kind of rounded out the middle. The big thing that kind of blew me away was how many tickets Gladly opens for such a relatively new company. Are there any other insights that you gained from this, Michael? And did I get the definition of that metric correct?
Yes, you got it absolutely correct. I can only add that we count only days when the tickets were open. So if a support agent was on PTO or was doing some other work which is not related to the ticketing system, these days are not count. And we also need to take into account that one ticket can be opened by multiple agents. So the large number of tickets on Zendesk, for example, may be the fact that a person opens the ticket, then sends it over to another agent, and then to another agent. We observed situations where a ticket was opened by 4 agents at the same time, at the same day. So
Wow.
this can also inflate the number of tickets opened per day. But generally, yes, the more tickets the agents opened, the more chances to close more tickets.
That's amazing. That's actually a really interesting insight, which is when you think about this, and this is kind of the theme that we're going to be taking a look at as we go through this presentation. The UI UX, the user interface, user experience of these applications can, in some context, directly impact the overall output and productivity of a particular support agent. And the cool thing is that you can't really analyze these all at the same time except inside of Time Doctor because we're looking at all of this data very equally. We're a third party viewer of all of these support ticket software companies and how they operate with their clients. So it's very interesting to be able to see Zendesk and Gladly opening up so many tickets. And I'm actually kind of underwhelmed that HubSpot has only 10 tickets opened per user per day. One of my theories on that, Michael, and correct me if I'm wrong, are we getting a lot of salespeople that are coming in and maybe that's kind of muddying the data on the HubSpot support ticket module, or is it something else, do you think?
That's a probable explanation. So
Okay.
if I, for example, go to the HubSpot and just have a look at what is going on, and I open just one or two tickets, then this day is counted as I have only two tickets per day opened. But in general, uh, I guess my assumption is that more people are using HubSpot for support rather than sales. But we can verify it. And if we have the data of a particular client, we can single out the support people and sales people and do the benchmarking separately for the two groups.
Right. But only if you're part of the beta program, which again is get.timedoctor.com/beta-program. I got to hustle every single time on that URL. Michael, all right, next slide here. Share of tickets solved below 10 minutes. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to explain this for everybody. But again, Gladly comes out with one of the highest scores at 71%. What do you think about that, Michael? How do you explain this?
I think that's remarkable. And it may be a very good sign or a very bad sign. A very bad sign is that Gladly forces users to close the ticket even though it is not completed. But we don't need to think bad of Gladly.
Or it may be actually great, which is because of the way that Gladly is built, you can actually solve tickets much faster than in any of the other products that are currently on the market. I was also pretty blown away that Intercom is the lowest out of those because Intercom is one of the biggest, I mean, support ticketing platforms I know of. We use in our company we use Zendesk, and we have used Intercom in the past, and we've actually used Freshdesk, and I think we're now actually moving. We have a part of our support ticket portal that's on HubSpot. So the only two products that we haven't used here is Gladly and Help Scout, ironically. And so far, I really want to be able to test out Gladly to see whether or not we might be missing something huge in terms of just the way that that software is designed.
So I have another comment here. We
Mm-hmm.
remember that for HubSpot, it had the lowest share of tickets, of number of tickets per agent per day. And it was expected that HubSpot would have the longer time and the lower share of tickets solved below 10 minutes, but it is actually on par with other tools on the market. So it means that for some reason, there are easy tickets to solve on HubSpot, and there are some very long tickets which take a lot of time, and
Mm.
that makes an agent spend a lot of energy and digging into stuff and being able to solve only few tickets per day.
Mm. And the other, just to kind of go back to this other slide here, with tickets open per day per user at 10 for HubSpot, and then 58% of share of tickets solved below 10 minutes. That's also one of my reasonings as to why I don't think we have a bias in the data here, because it seems to be on par with everyone else in terms of that industry, in terms of the industry. So we'll get into kind of the other details in the other slides to be able to show that. Next one here. Sheriff tickets solved over 8 hours. Um, Everyone seems to be around the same ballpark except for Gladly, which is at 3%. How do we explain that?
So again, we may have a good explanation for Gladly or a bad one. The good
Hmm.
one is that it is super efficient and people don't leave their tickets overnight and they close everything pretty quickly. Or the bad one that gladly forces them to close the ticket before the shift ends, and the new day means the new ticket. So we need to explore that.
Right. Yeah, it's quite interesting as well to be able to see the differences in all of these ticketing software platforms. And to me, right now, if those current slides are true, and I would probably say at least this one and this one are true. This one just doesn't even seem real based off of our analysis. But if this one is real, I would definitely be checking out Gladly because they're doing something there that's completely different. If Gladly is on this webinar, please tell us why. That would be great to be able to figure out why you're performing so much better or maybe so much worse than everyone else in the industry.
And glad
Next
they
one is
didn't pay
count
us.
of Gladly. That's another thing. I would want to make that super clear. Zendesk, Intercom, Freshdesk, HubSpot, Gladly, and Help Scout did not pay us a penny for this. I'm really good friends with the founder of Help Scout. He actually attended Running Remote twice. They're a very proud remote first company. HubSpot is actually a distributed company as well. None of us paid us. These are our own personal opinions, not personal opinions, our data backed opinions. And if one of you do want to pay us, we're very, very expensive to pay off. So you basically have to bring a dump truck full of cash to be able to buy us off. Just to let you know, that is available. Um, but hopefully, DM me if you're interested in trying to buy me off in some way. Count of sessions per ticket. That's another one that's quite interesting. 9 sessions per ticket, Zendesk, versus 4 for Gladly. What are your theories on this one, Michael?
So I I would explain a little bit of what we mean by sessions per ticket. It means we
Mm-hmm.
have a ticket and a person goes to Zendesk, looks at the ticket, then goes to some other application or website, then comes back to Zendesk, then goes to another chat application, whatever else, and then comes back and does this on average 9 times for Zendesk and 5 times for Intercom. And our assumption is that the fewer times you need to switch from one tool to another, the more effective you are, the more data, the more tools you have inside the system. And it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the 9 for Zendesk is probably not a good thing. But
Mm.
we are open to interpretation here.
Well, and you hit on a really good point that applies to general productivity metrics, which is every time you're pulled out of flow state. So you have to go from your Zendesk application to a wiki, as an example, that might exist outside of the platform, or maybe you need to go to a support article, or maybe you need to go to a Zoom call, as an example. These are all opportunities for you to become distracted and be in Facebook, Twitter, social media, video game land, and not actually come back and focus on what you need to do. So we want to be able to have that number as low as possible. And it blows me away that Zendesk is so high versus an application like Gladly and Intercom, which are relatively low. It's quite cool. Session duration in seconds. Can you explain this one, Michael? Because I had difficulty kind of getting down the core part of this concept.
Yeah. So this is the flip side of the session count. So
Mm-hmm.
the fewer session you have, the longer you stay in the application on average. So we see the reversed picture. Zendesk has a lot of switching and it has the lowest duration of time when a person stays on this ticket URL. So an agent stays for 5 seconds on Zendesk, switches somewhere else, and then goes back and forth like this. And for Intercom,
Mm-hmm.
they stay for longer, and probably the numbers are still not that high. So for 10 seconds, maybe 10 seconds wouldn't qualify for the flow state, but
Mm-hmm.
still it's a good start.
Right. So essentially, Intercom is able to hold a user for the longest amount of time in comparison to everyone else in the industry.
And it may be a bad thing. So
Mhm.
for Intercom to navigate and to do the right thing, it takes you 10 seconds, while for Zendesk it takes you 5 seconds. So,
Right. Yes. No, and that's another very good point. Um, I think a lot of this stuff you have to take with a bit of a grain of salt. And obviously, if you want this data afterwards, we can give it to you. You just let us know. Let us know in the chat that you want these slides, and we can give you access to them. But as Michael just reinforced, we don't know whether or not this is good or bad. We're just giving you the hard metrics, and then we're theorizing on them. So it's really up to you to be able to do a deeper analysis on this data and let us know what you think. Next one is idle time share on the tool. Now, to me, actually, this is a very clear metric that is important to be able to take into consideration. I think the more idle time you have on the tool, probably the worse the tool is. And I hate to say that because I love Intercom. And I actually was somebody that was saying, hey, we need to be able to get everyone back on side of Intercom. Like, I never knew why we left Intercom in the first place. This is kind of an internal debate and discussion inside of Time Doctor as to why we switched from Intercom to a bunch of other tools. But it looks like here, Intercom has a 54% idle time rate in comparison to everyone else in the industry. And again, Zendesk and Gladly are actually in like the basically at the bottom of that metric. What do you have to say with regards to this slide, Michael?
I would like to give a definition of what idle time is. So we calculate idle seconds, and each second is considered idle if no keyboard activity or mouse activity was present on this particular second. And the way to interpret the data is for Intercom, we have 54% of seconds with no keyboard and mouse activity when the person was working on Intercom.
Mhm.
And it is not reasonable to believe that the support agents can have zero idle time. Idle time is okay, but
Mhm.
the comparison and the trend, so if you see that the share of idle time is growing, that's a bad sign. If you see that
Mm.
on some tool share of idle time is high, this is also not a very good indicator, because, for example, it may take some time for dialog boxes or for some report to load, and the loading time is typically the idle time. So this can be an indirect measurement of the effectiveness and the user experience the people have on various platforms.
Very good point. And I would also reinforce as well, if you are part of the beta program and you take a look at our support agent benchmarking as an example, you can now use these particular pieces of data to directly apply against your team because we take an entire idle time metric for our support agent benchmarking, which is, I don't know what the exact number is, but let's say it's like 52%. But if you're using Gladly or if you're using Zendesk, you're actually probably above the average. So we're biasing the tools to that particular average. And we've amalgamated all of those tools into one particular metric. But if you're using Zendesk as an example, let's say you want your reps at, I don't know, let's call it like a 45 to like 35% average idle time. Whereas something like Intercom, you might need a very different interpretation of that data. I would also reinforce here, and one of my beliefs as to why Intercom might be higher is I know I used Intercom a lot as an analysis tool. So I would actually look at all of our users and figure out, well, how many of them have more than 200 employees and access this report on a regular basis. And you can run those types of reports inside of Intercom, which you can't do in any of these other tools, but it requires a lot of loading speed or it takes like, I would probably say when I was using it, 30 seconds to like 2 minutes to be able to run some of those reports. Maybe that's a small explanation, but I just don't think it necessarily makes up for all of the extra time that people are spending on Intercom without doing anything. Let's go on to the next one. Keys per minute. And I'm assuming that is keystrokes per minute, right, Michael?
Absolutely.
Right. So again, weirdly enough, Gladly wins this. Gladly has the highest keystrokes per minute out of any of the applications. Helps Out coming in second, and Zendesk rounding out third place, and HubSpot being significantly lower than everyone else, which we've been theorizing that internally, that maybe because it's a CRM slash ticketing tool, that some of that data is like muddying up the interpretation that we have for you here. We're being completely open and honest with you in that context. But the more keystrokes that are happening on a support ticketing software tool, generally the better. You want that to be able to happen because people are able to get to their tickets faster, write responses faster, and send them back to the customer faster. So just based off of this single slide, I would definitely say Gladly, Help Scout, and Zendesk are the top ones out there, and Freshdesk and HubSpot are quite a bit lower. Any other thoughts that you have on this, Michael?
Liam, I just imagined a support tool which has very low keystrokes per minute but is super effective, and it may
Mm,
employ AI inside. So an agent
yes,
wouldn't type in the answer, but these would be
like
pre-generated
auto
and
completes.
autocomplete, right? And you just click, you just read it out, you say, yeah, that's perfect. You click send, and you're done.
Yeah. If anyone knows if tools like Freshdesk or HubSpot have that and Gladly doesn't, please let us know in the chat because it would not only help us know, but it would help everyone else that's doing their analyses. Because as of right now, if they don't have that, if everything is equal, Gladly, Help Scout, and Zendesk are the clear winner for this particular variable. Mouse movements per minute. More of the same, but kind of different. I don't think there's much that we could really speak to on this slide. Do you have any kind of insights on this, Michael?
Um, I would just have a general comment that mouse
Okay.
movements are not very productive. So the more you have to move your mouse, the worse the user experience probably, because the elements of the design are in different places and you need to go a long way with your mouse to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
Or you feel very bored and you just move your mouse around, waiting for the report to load. So in general, we believe that higher mouse movements are not good for productivity. And here, Intercom is on top. So we didn't praise Intercom much before, but here it looks good.
Okay. Well, I think that the other part of this too, very good point. But then we also look at a tool like HubSpot that scored the highest. And HubSpot is not just a ticketing software, it's a CRM, it's a marketing tool, it's basically like a portal for everything. That may also explain why there's a lot more mouse movements on HubSpot than there is on other tools. But really interesting analysis. I think we have one that's connected directly to this too. Yeah, mouse clicks per minute. Essentially the same metric here. I mean, they're almost HubSpot moved a spot or two, but essentially this is the same um, generalized metrics across the across the board. Any thoughts that you have on mouse clicks, or do you think it's essentially the same, Michael?
So unlike mouse movements, mouse clicks are believed to be a little bit more productive, but
Mm-hmm.
these two are very much connected one to one another. So you
Right.
generally don't move your mouse a lot, and you don't click, or you don't click a lot without moving the mouse. But if we see that such behavior occurs in your company, we can flag it as unusual behavior, and we say that something is wrong. And one thing which can be wrong is some of your people are using auto clickers or other cheating devices, which also
Mm-hmm.
may affect their productivity. And as Liam may mention, if you sign up to the Time Doctor gettimedoctor.com slash beta
Dash program.
beta dash program, yeah, nailed it finally. Then then you will be able to see if your agents are really working or they're slacking off and just have some kind of cheating software doing the jobs for them, like faking their jobs for them.
Yeah. And that's another one of our beta features, obviously, which is our unusual activity report, which allows you to be able to analyze whether or not someone is using any type of software mouse movement application or even physical mouse movement software tool, or not software tools, hardware tools. There are literally like machines that spin and you put your mouse on it and it will just move the mouse in a particular sequence. And because that is information that is those are computers that are basically collecting that information, we can quickly analyze that data using very simplistic machine learning and tell you whether or not someone is using those types of applications. We always hate that to see that type of data happen, particularly for remote workers. We think that there's a much higher level of trust required for remote work. And that trust is not only from employee to employer, but it's also from employer to employee. There needs to be a bridge. And unfortunately, if people are using tools like auto clickers, it just creates an environment that ends up having a lot more people going back to the office, which we personally don't like. So that tool is also available in the beta program if you're interested. Next slide here, share of tool time per day. And this one is actually really interesting because I think this one sums up a lot of the data that we've been talking about inside of this session. Gladly, HubSpot, Freshdesk, again, being super, I mean, in my opinion, the amount of time that you spend on the tool per day, the lower it is, theoretically, the more that you get done. Intercom has a much higher ratio of time spent in the particular tool. But Michael, what's your interpretation of this?
I may be a devil's advocate here. I would
Go
say
ahead.
for support agent, if they can solve the ticket without leaving the ticketing system, that's great. And having everything done within one system means having the higher share of tool time per day. And Intercom here ends up as a leader. But alternatively, it's not obviously maybe it may not be the best way to have the workflow set up. So if you
Mm.
have the internal databases, internal knowledge systems, and effective chats and other tools which are uh, available for the support agents, and they use them effectively, then it is fine. And probably a warning sign is to see a very high or very low number of a particular agents compared to the benchmarks. So if we see the particular agent is spending 80% of time on Zendesk, while the typical number is 20, that is something to worry about because
Mm.
things are not right for this particular person. Or if the person spends 1% of time on Zendesk and 99% of time on Outlook, that's also something strange to look for. So these are more of the benchmarks to understand what is normal and what is less normal.
Right. I think that's another interesting way to take a look at it. I mean, I'd love it for everyone to mention that in the chat or ask, give your 2 cents in the chat. Share of tool time per day. Is higher better or is lower better? What do you think? Higher better, lower better? Just put it in the chat. I'd love to be able to get our a general survey here because it's funny. I think that lower is better, but Michael, you think that higher is better. Being devil's advocate on the other side of this, so it's you can't just look at one of these slides in um, in a vacuum and say, oh, well, I should only be using Gladly and I shouldn't be using Intercom. Because if you take a look at some of these other variables, you can see like idle time share on tool. Intercom is much higher than Gladly. Session duration, Intercom is much higher than Gladly. Um, count of sessions per ticket, Zendesk, Freshdesk, much higher than Gladly or Intercom. And then obviously share of tickets solved over 8 hours gladly is much lower, almost to the point in which we think that we have to be able to reanalyze this data to be able to take a look at it. So you can't just analyze this data on one slide and say, hey, this is what this information, this is, we should definitely be choosing Gladly, or we should be using Zendesk or Intercom or Freshdesk. You have to look at them all together to be able to get a proper interpretation. I want to be able to kind of leave us here with a couple questions for people. So if you have further questions, please let us know. If you would like these slides, you need to go to get.timedoctor.com/beta program. And those slides are going to allow you to be able to get access to something like our benchmarking report for support agents. We're going to be able to get access to the unusual activity report, which Michael already mentioned previously, and a bunch of other beta features that we can't even tell you about because they're confidential. So the only way that you can get access to them, whether you're an existing customer or you're a prospective customer, is to go to the URL get.timedoctor.com/beta-program. And Vaishali, you'll put that in the chat. You put in your email address, Liam at Time Doctor. You put in your first name, which for me is Liam, last name Martin, company. I know that they cut it. Oh no, it's just my problem that cuts this off. And then you just click up on sign up today, and you're going to get access to all of our beta features before anyone else. That is inside of our main user base, which we have hundreds of thousands of users throughout the network. So you get access to these features before anyone else. You'll actually be able to influence the product development. So if you're like, hey, I really want to know everything about Salesforce support ticketing portal, you can email us and we will directly pay attention, because we only look inside of the beta group for that type of feedback. So you can influence product development. You also get exclusive webinars from people like me and Michael. You can stay ahead of the curve.